Yeah, man. About to go get this $1,000 out for the fans, man. Really, I'm gonna take out 20,000, man, just to show people. You feel me? I'm on a whole different level with this, man.
Make sure that bitch is dead. Those were the exact words a son whispered into his phone while listening to his own mother get executed in her bedroom. 23-year-old Carmaine Wilson didn't just hire someone to kill Yolanda Holmes. He stayed on the phone during the murder, coaching his hitman through every brutal stab wound and gunshot. The woman bleeding out on her apartment floor had just finished paying for his music studio time that week. She'd bought him a Mustang, designer Jordan sneakers, and bailed him out of jail more times than she could count. Yolanda Holmes worked 16-hour days at her hair salon, so her precious baby boy could chase his rap dreams as young QC. 3 days after her funeral, Wilson was at the bank withdrawing her entire life savings. $90,000, that was supposed to be her retirement money. He spent it on gull-wing doors for his car and filmed himself throwing $1,000 stacks at strangers, screaming, "This is for my fans," while his mother rotted 6 feet underground. But the universe has a sick sense of humor. That same cocky rapper who thought he was untouchable? Prison inmates don't play games with mama's boys who kill their mothers. Wilson got passed around like currency, sexually assaulted so many times he begged for solitary confinement. Even serial killers and gang members have a code, and matricide breaks every single rule. The YouTube video that made him internet famous became Exhibit A in his murder trial. The custom car became evidence of his greed. And that phone call where he made sure mommy was really dead. The FBI had every single word recorded. If you think you're strong enough to hear how a mother's love became her death warrant, smash that subscribe button right now. But honestly, most people will click away because they can't handle knowing that monsters don't hide under beds. They sit at your dinner table calling you mama. Drop a comment and tell me if you would have seen this coming, or if you're too scared to admit you might have been just as blind as Yolanda Holmes. Yolanda Holmes was the kind of mother every kid dreams of having, and that's exactly what killed her. At 45 years old, this 5-foot-tall powerhouse had built Nappy Head's salon from absolutely nothing into the heart of Chicago's uptown community. She didn't just style hair. She became the neighborhood therapist, the woman who listened to every broken heart and celebrated every small victory. But Yolanda's biggest pride wasn't her thriving business or her loyal customers who'd been coming to her for 15 years. It was her son Carmaine, the boy she'd raised completely alone after his father got locked up for life on a double murder charge. She looked at that beautiful baby and promised herself he'd never know poverty, never feel abandoned, never want for anything. And she kept that promise to a fault. When Carmaine wanted to be a rapper, Yolanda didn't laugh or tell him to get a real job like most parents would. She opened her wallet and funded his entire fantasy. Studio time, paid for. Music videos, covered. Designer clothes to look the part. She bought him everything from head to toe. The Mustang was her biggest sacrifice. Yolanda worked double shifts for months, saving every penny so her baby could have the car of his dreams. She handed him those keys with tears in her eyes, telling everyone at the salon how proud she was of her son's music career. Even when that career never took off, even when the views stayed low and the money never came, she kept believing. But here's what Yolanda didn't see, or maybe refused to see. Her son had stopped looking at her like a mother and started seeing her like a bank account with legs. When he got arrested for carrying a BB gun, she hired the best lawyer money could buy. When he needed bail money, she emptied her savings without question. When he wanted expensive jewelry to look successful in his videos, she sold her own gold to make it happen. The warning signs were screaming at everyone except Yolanda. Carmaine started asking weird questions about her life insurance policies. How much was she worth? Who would get the money if something happened to her? Normal kids don't quiz their parents about death benefits, but Yolanda just thought he was being responsible. Then came the strange phone calls in the middle of the night, hushed conversations that stopped the moment she walked into the room. New friends hanging around who gave her the creeps, especially that Eugene Spencer character who never looked her in the eye. His girlfriend Lorana would come to the salon sometimes, acting nervous and jumpy like she was hiding something terrible. But Yolanda Holmes had spent 23 years seeing only the good in her son. She convinced herself that unconditional love could fix anything, heal any wound, prevent any tragedy. That blind faith in motherhood became the weapon he used to destroy her. Young QC was living in a fantasy world, and his mother's love was the only thing keeping that delusion alive. While real rappers were grinding in studios and building actual fan bases, Carmaine Wilson was playing dress-up with mommy's money. His YouTube videos had maybe a few hundred views. His music sounded like amateur hour, and industry professionals wouldn't even return his calls. But in his twisted mind, he wasn't a failed rapper living off his mother's generosity. He was a future superstar being held back by circumstances. And the biggest circumstance? Yolanda Holmes controlled all the money. Every time he wanted to make a big purchase or fund another music video, he had to go begging to mama like a child asking for allowance. That's when the sick calculation started. Carmaine looked at his mother's life insurance policies and saw dollar signs. He calculated her savings account balance and saw freedom. He realized that as her only child and sole beneficiary, her death would make him instantly rich. No more asking permission, no more explaining his expenses, no more being treated like a dependent. The plan wasn't born from rage or a moment of insanity. This was cold, calculated greed wrapped in narcissistic delusion. Carmaine convinced himself he deserved that money more than his mother did. After all, she was just a hairstylist in her 40s. He was a young artist with his whole career ahead of him. In his warped logic, killing her was almost like an investment in his future. Eugene Spencer was the perfect weapon for this job. 22 years old with a criminal record for theft and assault, Eugene was exactly the kind of desperate street kid who'd do anything for quick cash. He'd been floating between neighborhoods, picking up odd jobs and petty crimes to survive. When Carmaine approached him with an opportunity to make some serious money, Eugene didn't ask too many questions. The offer was simple but devastating. $3,500 to handle a problem. Carmaine painted it like a business transaction, not a murder. He told Eugene that his mother had been disrespecting him, holding back his career, keeping him from his rightful inheritance. He made it sound like justice instead of matricide. Lorana Johnson became the third piece of this deadly puzzle. As Carmaine's on-and-off girlfriend, she knew about his resentment toward his mother and his obsession with getting rich quick. When he asked her to drive Eugene to handle some business, she agreed without fully understanding what that business involved. Or maybe she knew exactly what was happening and chose the money over morality. The logistics were disturbingly simple. Carmaine had his mother's building access codes because he visited regularly. He knew her routine, knew when she'd be asleep, knew that her boyfriend Curtis sometimes stayed over. He gave Eugene a detergent bottle and some clothes as props to make him look like a resident doing laundry at 4 in the morning. But the most chilling detail was the headphones. Carmaine told Eugene to wear headphones during the job, not for music, but so he could stay on the phone and receive real-time instructions. This wasn't just a murder for hire. It was a remote-controlled execution with the victim's own son calling the shots from miles away. September 2nd, 2012 started like any other night for Yolanda Holmes. She closed up nappy heads around 8 p.m., counting the day's earnings and planning tomorrow's appointments. Her boyfriend Curtis Wyatt came over for dinner, and they spent the evening watching television and talking about their future together. Yolanda had no idea that her son was across town, finalizing the details of her murder. At exactly 4:15 a.m., Eugene Spencer punched in the building access code that Carmaine had given him. Security cameras captured everything. A young black man in a hoodie, carrying a detergent bottle and clothes on hangers, looking like any other resident doing late-night laundry. But those headphones around his neck weren't for music. They were his direct line to the mastermind. The elevator ride to Yolanda's floor took 37 seconds. Eugene later testified that Carmaine was already on the phone, whispering instructions and reminding him about the unlocked door. She's sleeping in the back bedroom. Her boyfriend might be there, but don't worry about him. Just handle my mother and get out. Curtis Wyatt woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. In the darkness, he could barely make out a figure moving toward the bedroom, where Yolanda was still sleeping peacefully. When Curtis tried to get up and investigate, Eugene panicked and fired the first shot. The bullet missed Curtis, but the sound woke up Yolanda. And that's when everything went to hell. What happened next was pure brutality. Eugene shot Yolanda Holmes in the head at point-blank range while she was still in bed. But the gunshot didn't kill her immediately. So he pulled out a kitchen knife and stabbed her twice in the chest. Curtis fought like his life depended on it, wrestling with Eugene and managing to break the gun's handle during the struggle. The most bone-chilling part wasn't the violence itself. It was the phone call happening simultaneously. While his mother was bleeding out and gasping for her final breaths, Carmaine Wilson was on the other end of that phone line, listening to every gunshot and every scream. When Eugene hesitated after the first attack, thinking maybe Yolanda was already dead, Carmaine's voice came through those headphones crystal clear. "Make sure that bitch is dead. I don't want any mistakes." Those words were captured on Eugene's phone records and later played in court. A son giving the kill order on his own mother while she fought for her life, just feet away from the phone. Eugene admitted that hearing Carmaine's cold, emotionless voice in that moment made him realize he was working for a complete psychopath. The entire attack lasted 14 minutes. 14 minutes for a mother's life to end and a son's inheritance to begin. By 4:46 a.m., Eugene was walking out of the building in a different hoodie, passing a random resident who had no idea they'd just witnessed a killer's escape. Curtis Wyatt was left bleeding and unconscious, and Yolanda Holmes would never see another sunrise. But Carmaine Wilson's night was just getting started. While paramedics were rushing to save Curtis and police were securing the crime scene, Wilson was already at an ATM across town, checking his mother's account balance and planning his shopping spree. The woman who'd given him life was still warm, and he was already spending her death money. The funeral hadn't even happened yet when Carmaine Wilson walked into Chase Bank with his mother's death certificate and a smile on his face. September 5th, 2012, just 3 days after watching his mother get executed over the phone, he was cashing in on her corpse. The bank teller later testified that Wilson seemed excited, almost giddy, as he transferred $90,000 from Yolanda's retirement account into his own name. Most sons would be planning memorial services or grieving with family. Wilson was planning the sickest shopping spree Chicago had ever seen. His first stop wasn't a funeral home or a flower shop. It was a custom car garage in the South Side where he dropped $30,000 to install gull-wing doors on the Mustang his dead mother had bought him. The mechanic who did the work remembered Wilson bragging about his inheritance and how he was finally going to live like the star he'd always been meant to be. When asked about his mother's sudden death, Wilson just shrugged and said she would have wanted me to be happy. The same woman who'd worked 16-hour days to buy him that car was being used to justify desecrating it with blood money. But the custom car was just the beginning of Wilson's grotesque celebration. He hit every high-end store in downtown Chicago, buying $1,000 sneakers, designer chains, and clothes that cost more than most people's rent. Sales associates later told police that Wilson was throwing money around like he'd won the lottery, not like someone who'd just lost his mother. The YouTube video that made Wilson internet famous was filmed exactly 1 week after Yolanda's murder. Standing in a parking lot next to his newly customized Mustang, Wilson pulled out thick stacks of $100 bills and started throwing them at a crowd of random people. "This is for my fans," he screamed, laughing maniacally as strangers scrambled to grab his mother's retirement money off the ground. The video went viral for all the wrong reasons. Comments poured in asking where a failed rapper got that kind of cash, especially since his music videos barely had any views. Wilson loved the attention so much he made several more videos, each one more outrageous than the last. He filmed himself buying expensive jewelry, showing off his car's new doors, and bragging about his success in the music industry. What made the videos even more disturbing was the complete absence of grief. Not once did Wilson mention his mother's death, express any sadness, or ask for prayers for his family. He acted like Yolanda Holmes had never existed, like the money had just magically appeared in his bank account. Friends and family members who saw the videos were horrified, but Wilson was too high on his newfound wealth to care. The investigation team couldn't believe what they were watching. Detective Michelle Wood later said it was the most callous display of guilt she'd ever seen in 20 years of homicide work. Here was a suspect literally broadcasting his motive to the entire internet, using his victim's money to fund his own viral fame. But Wilson's social media celebration was creating a digital trail that would destroy him in court. Every purchase, every video, every bragging post was being screenshotted and saved by investigators. The same internet fame he craved so desperately was building an ironclad case for first-degree murder. The most damning evidence came from Wilson's own phone record. While he was filming himself throwing cash and showing off his car, his phone was still pinging the same cell towers as Eugene Spencer's device. Even after the murder, the two killers couldn't stay away from each other, meeting up to split the remaining money and celebrate their successful business transaction. Wilson thought he was living his dream, but he was actually documenting his own downfall. Every dollar he spent, every video he posted, every smile he flashed at the camera was another nail in his coffin. The viral fame he'd killed his mother for was about to become the evidence that would lock him away forever. Chicago PD detectives had seen plenty of cold-blooded killers, but they'd never encountered someone stupid enough to live-stream their guilt on social media. While Carmaine Wilson was busy becoming internet famous with his mother's blood money, investigators were building a digital fortress around him that would be impossible to escape. The breakthrough came from Yolanda's phone records, and what they revealed made seasoned homicide detectives physically sick. Yolanda Holmes had two phones registered under her name, which seemed odd for a single woman running a small business. When they dug deeper, they discovered the second phone was actually being used by her son, a gift from a mother who wanted to keep her baby connected. That second phone became Wilson's digital death sentence. The call logs showed constant communication between Wilson and Eugene Spencer in the weeks leading up to the murder, but the activity on September 2nd was absolutely damning. 3 phone calls between 4 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., right during the exact window when Yolanda was being butchered in her bedroom. But the most chilling discovery was the call duration. The final call between Wilson and Spencer lasted 14 minutes and 23 seconds, which perfectly matched the timeline of the attack. This wasn't just coordination. This was real-time murder coaching. Wilson had literally listened to his mother die while giving instructions to her killer. Cell tower data painted an even clearer picture of the conspiracy. Spencer's phone pinged towers near Yolanda's building at exactly 4:32 a.m. The same time security cameras showed him entering with his detergent bottle disguise. Meanwhile, Wilson's phone was pinging towers miles away in North Austin, giving him the perfect alibi while still maintaining command and control of the execution. The surveillance footage from Yolanda's building was like watching a horror movie in slow motion. Eugene Spencer entering at 4:32 a.m., looking nervous but determined. The same man exiting at 4:46 a.m. in different clothes, walking past an innocent resident who had no idea they'd just crossed paths with a fresh killer. The 14-minute gap that destroyed 2 families forever. When detectives finally brought Eugene Spencer in for questioning, he cracked faster than cheap concrete. The 22-year-old street kid thought he was tough enough to handle a murder charge, but 12 hours in an interrogation room with experienced detectives broke him completely. He confessed to everything, and his testimony was more horrifying than anyone expected. Spencer admitted that Wilson had recruited him weeks earlier, promising $3,500 for what he called handling a problem. Wilson never explicitly said murder during their initial conversations, but he made it clear that his mother needed to disappear permanently. The money was too good for Spencer to ask too many questions. The most damaging part of Spencer's confession was his description of the phone call during the murder. He testified that Wilson stayed on the line the entire time, coaching him through every step of the attack. When Spencer hesitated after shooting Yolanda, thinking she might already be dead, Wilson's voice came through the headphones cold and clear. "Make sure that bitch is dead." Lorana Johnson's arrest came 24 hours after Spencer's confession. The 23-year-old getaway driver initially tried to play innocent, claiming she thought they were just going to rob Yolanda, not kill her. But phone records showed she'd been in contact with both Wilson and Spencer throughout the planning stages, and her car was captured on multiple security cameras near the crime scene. The financial evidence was the final nail in Wilson's coffin. Bank records showed he'd withdrawn nearly $70,000 from his mother's accounts in the months following her death, spending it on everything from car modifications to designer clothes to expensive jewelry. The timing of these purchases, combined with his viral videos, created an undeniable pattern of guilt. When Chicago PD finally arrested Carmaine Wilson on December 22, 2013, he didn't seem surprised. Detectives later said he acted like he'd been expecting this day for over a year, sitting calmly in the interrogation room without demanding a lawyer or proclaiming his innocence. It was almost like he was relieved that the game was finally over. The arrest made national headlines, not just because of the brutal nature of the crime, but because of Wilson's social media behavior afterward. News outlets played his money-throwing videos alongside footage of his mother's funeral, creating a stark contrast that shocked viewers across the country. The aspiring rapper who'd killed for fame had finally gotten the attention he'd always wanted, just not the way he'd imagined. March 25, 2019. After 6 years of legal delays and failed appeals, Carmaine Wilson finally sat in a Cook County courtroom, facing the consequences of his matricide. The trial that Chicago had been waiting for was about to expose every sick detail of how a son orchestrated his own mother's execution for internet fame and blood money. Prosecutor James McKay didn't waste time with sympathy or emotion. He opened with the phone records, the cell tower data, and the 14-minute call that captured a mother's murder in real time. When he played Wilson's YouTube videos for the jury, showing him throwing his dead mother's retirement money at strangers while laughing, several jurors visibly recoiled in disgust. The most devastating moment came when Eugene Spencer took the witness stand and repeated Wilson's exact words during the murder. "Make sure that bitch is dead." The courtroom fell completely silent as Spencer described hearing Yolanda's final gasps through the phone while her own son coached her killer through the execution. 2 jurors started crying, and Wilson just sat there with no expression on his face. Wilson's defense team tried to paint him as a grieving son who'd made poor financial decisions after losing his mother, but the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution had phone records, surveillance footage, financial documents, witness testimony, and Wilson's own viral videos, proving premeditation and motive. It took the jury less than 4 hours to find him guilty on all counts. Judge Stanley Sachs had presided over hundreds of murder cases, but he'd never seen anything quite like this level of betrayal. When he sentenced Wilson to 99 years in prison, his words cut through the courtroom like a blade. The word is matricide, meaning murder of one's own mother. Whatever he wanted, his mother gave to him. She gave Carmaine life, and it was his choice to take it away from her. Eugene Spencer received 100 years for pulling the trigger, while Lorana Johnson got 25 years for her role as getaway driver. But Wilson's sentence carried extra weight because of his leadership role and the calculated nature of his betrayal. The judge made it clear that someone who could murder their own mother for money was beyond rehabilitation. But the real justice was waiting for Wilson behind bars at Stateville Correctional Center. Prison has its own moral code, and matricide sits at the very bottom of that hierarchy. Even hardened killers, gang members, and drug dealers draw the line at murdering your own mother. Within weeks of his arrival, Wilson discovered that his reputation had preceded him. The first assault happened in the shower block during his second month. 3 inmates cornered Wilson and made it clear that mama's boys who kill their mothers get special treatment in prison. The sexual assault was brutal and prolonged, with guards conveniently looking the other way. When Wilson tried to report it, he was told that snitches get worse treatment than matricide cases. The attacks became a regular occurrence. Wilson was passed around like currency among different prison gangs, each one taking their turn to deliver their own version of justice. His commissary money was stolen, his mail was intercepted, and his cell was vandalized with messages about what happens to sons who betray their mothers. After 6 months of constant abuse, Wilson begged for protective custody and solitary confinement. The same man who'd bragged about being a tough street rapper was now crying to guards about needing protection from other inmates. He spent 23 hours a day locked in a tiny cell, with 1 hour of supervised recreation in a concrete cage. The isolation broke Wilson's mind faster than the physical abuse had broken his body. Guards reported that he would spend hours talking to himself, sometimes pretending to have conversations with his dead mother. He'd apologize to the walls, beg for forgiveness from empty air, and scream about how nobody understood that he'd really loved Yolanda. During a rare prison interview in 2021, Wilson made a statement that proved he still didn't understand the magnitude of his crime. "Nobody loved my mother more than me," he told the reporter, apparently believing his own delusion. "I made some mistakes, but everything I did was because I loved her and wanted to make her proud." That interview was Wilson's last public statement. Prison officials decided that giving him a platform was too dangerous, especially after other inmates threatened to riot if they had to keep seeing his face on television. The viral fame he'd killed his mother for had finally been silenced by the same system that was supposed to rehabilitate him. Today, Carmaine Wilson sits in solitary confinement, serving a sentence that will keep him locked up until he's 122 years old. The YouTube videos that made him famous have been deleted, the custom Mustang has been sold at auction, and the money he stole from his mother's retirement account has been donated to domestic violence charities. The Yolanda Holmes case isn't just a story about evil. It's a masterclass in how unconditional love can become a weapon in the wrong hands. Every warning sign was there, screaming at anyone who cared to look. But Yolanda's maternal blindness made her ignore red flags that would have terrified any other person. The life insurance questions should have been the first alarm bell. When your adult child starts asking detailed questions about your death benefits and who gets what money when you die, that's not normal curiosity. That's reconnaissance. Yolanda could have set boundaries, demanded to know why he was so interested in her mortality, or simply refused to discuss her financial affairs with someone who contributed nothing to the household. The strange phone calls and secretive behavior were another massive red flag that Yolanda chose to rationalize away. When your son starts whispering into his phone at all hours, hanging up when you enter the room, and bringing around sketchy friends who won't make eye contact, it's time to stop making excuses and start asking hard questions. Love doesn't mean ignoring obvious danger signs. But the biggest mistake Yolanda made was enabling Carmaine's delusions of grandeur without requiring any accountability or results. She funded a music career that existed only in his imagination, bought him luxury items he hadn't earned, and treated him like a successful artist when he was actually a grown man living off his mother's sacrifice. Real love sometimes means saying no, setting limits, and forcing people to face reality. The tragedy is that Yolanda Holmes died believing she was being a good mother, when she was actually creating the monster that would destroy her. Her unconditional financial support taught Carmaine that he was entitled to her money. Her refusal to set boundaries showed him that her resources were his to control, and her blind faith in his character prevented her from seeing the calculating predator he'd become. If this story made you think twice about unconditional love, you're not alone. Subscribe if you want more cases that expose the dark side of family bonds, because I guarantee you'll never look at parent-child relationships the same way again. And if you're one of those people who thinks this could never happen to you, well, that's exactly what Yolanda thought while she was writing checks for her son's fantasy lifestyle. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done differently? Or are you too scared to admit you might have made the same mistakes? Because here's the uncomfortable truth that most people won't say out loud. Every parent watching this video has probably enabled bad behavior in the name of love, ignored red flags because they wanted to believe the best about their child, or confused unconditional support with unconditional funding. The difference between you and Yolanda Holmes might just be luck, timing, or the fact that your child hasn't figured out how much you're worth dead versus alive. So hit that subscribe button if you're brave enough to keep exploring these uncomfortable truths, or scroll away if you'd rather keep living in denial about how thin the line really is between love and destruction.